All right, here is part 2 of chapter 2. Let's talk a little bit about data gathering strategies. There's all kinds of surveys. For example, we're very much used to questionnaires, to telephone surveys, to being interviewed to online surveys. One of the surveys that's very popular in criminal justice is the National Crime Victimization Survey, the Ncbs. And this survey is actually conducted in a way where they ask people about victimization. So you can take that data and compare that to what's actually reported to police, and you can then find out the percentage of crimes that are reported to the police. The victimization surveys go into a lot more detail, and so you get a wealth of information, and you can see examples of the National Crime Victimization Survey online through the National Institute of Justice or some of the other large institutions that present the data. And a lot of times, if you're conducting research and you're doing your literature review to start with to kind of see what's going on out there in the field, and you want to know about some trends and patterns, a good place to start is the National Crime Victimization Survey. We also have participant observation methods where the researcher studies a group through direct observation and various levels of involvement that would range all the way from just being there, observing, all the way to complete immersion in that particular group and actually becoming a participant as member. And then a lot of other times may be participating, but also letting those in the group know that one's a researcher. So that, again, there's a lot of ethical issues here if you're going to be studying a group and not informing them that you're a researcher. So you have to address that. But ethnography is a type of participant observation where often a researcher will spend a lot of time in the field developing relationships with the community or group of interest and really immerse themselves in that particular culture or subculture to understand a lot about their life, their behaviors, their daily routines, their attitudes, their relationships, and so on. Of course, there's always ethical and legal issues that come up in ethnographic work if it involves any type of illegal activities. And there certainly have been some ethnographic studies published where the researcher does observe illegal activities. And so, that has to be addressed as well from an ethical and legal perspective. Also, there's life history and case studies. The use of diaries, letters, biographies, and autobiographies can be very relevant and important in criminal justice research. And there's also unobtrusive measures or non-reactive methods of collecting data. Your author says that these are secretive. In other words, you're not changing anything, intervening. And some of these are physical trace analysis, content analysis, secondary analysis, observation, and simulation. What's nice about unobtrusive measures is that you don't have to worry as much about your own presence at a particular scene or your own personality or relationship issues with people you might be interviewing. This is something, that you're looking either at. Secondary analysis is data that has already been collected. Of course, you're stuck with whatever happened when that data was collected, how good it is, and or if there's certain problems with it. But there's, content analysis. You can analyze the content of all kinds of documents, from speeches to video to internet sites. Physical trace analysis is often a term you hear about in criminal justice. But in the research area here, you can, trace things in a variety of ways. When I remember when I was studying sociology and we had the section on unobtrusive measures, I went out there in the university and looked around to see what I would see in the environment. What I found is that there was huge fields of grass, but then there'd be a dirt path cutting across, even though there was a sidewalk 20 feet away. That people just started taking that dirt path for whatever reason, and then it basically became a trail, even though there was a sidewalk nearby. And so there I saw, interesting trace in that sense that I could look at that had not been there initially when they planted all the grass. Also, when studies are conducted, we want to look at validity and reliability. Validity is the accuracy of the measurement, and reliability is the consistency or stability of the measurement. So you could have a scale that's reliable but not valid. That would be a scale that consistently measures wrong. So reliability and validity is what you really want. You want a measure that's not only reliable but also valid. I like to use examples sometimes when I go to Publix and get some groceries. I walk out and there's a big scale in Publix. I'm not sure why they have scales in Publix. I asked and they didn't know either. Anyway, I get on the scale and I would notice that it looks like I had, added 10, 15 pounds to my weight since I weighed myself at home, several days ago. And I turn around, get off the scale, and people always like to pretend they're not looking at how much you weigh, but they do out of the corner of their eye for some reason. And I'd say, wow, I put on some weight. And often they just shake their head, yeah, or ignore me. But a lot of times some nice citizen would say, well, you got your grocery bags in your hands, and there's probably 10 or 15 pounds of groceries in those bags. I say, oh, wow, thank you. And so that kind of, I use that as an example of reliability and validity. And also, was I conducting a very small ethnographic study? Who knows? But what I think the goal here is not to rote memorize these terms and then just kind of regurgitate them on an exam, but really to apply them to everyday situations, to what you're interested in looking at and studying, and to gaining a better understanding of how we use the theories and the methods. So that's what I really am getting at here, is that you have a bunch of interest, and there's probably some topic you're very passionate about, you want to know more about, so you can look at the research and think about how much of a problem is that statistically, how often does that occur, who is more likely to be a victimizer, who's more likely to be an offender, what are the patterns and trends, and then begin to think about, well, how does that occur, or why do we think that's happening, and begin to think about the theories that try to explain how or why that crime is actually occurring. And I think that helps when you start with something that is of great interest, to yourself. So this wraps up part 2 of chapter 2. Thank you.